In a unanimous vote on Tuesday, the Boulder City Council approved a ban against the sale and possession of so-called assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, and bump stocks rather. Owners of the guns in question can be grandfathered in upon submitting a certificate proving ownership. High-capacity magazine and bump stock owners will have to sell or dispose of their weapons by July 15th. Patty, out of all the weeks to not have David Kopel here, I think he would have enjoyed this, but he'll have plenty of time next week. Our own friend John Caldera is one of the folks on a lawsuit suing the city of Boulder. Probably not the first or last time John Caldera probably sued the city of Boulder, but this made a lot of headlines this week. What'd you make of it?
And it's only going to make more headlines because of where it is. Boulder, the city where animal owners are pet guardians, where I don't think you can be ugly and walk on the mall. I mean, there are all these different rules in Boulder that have passed through. It's not a surprise that something like this passed in Boulder. It's certainly not the only Colorado municipality that has made its own gun rules. Under home rule law, you can. Denver has far more strict gun laws than the rest of the state does. But in Boulder with Caldera, we're going to see a lot of action. People nationally like to talk about Boulder. It's the People's Republic of Boulder just makes for interesting press. Caldera always makes for interesting press. One of his co-plaintiffs is a 20-year-old because in addition to everything else, they raised the age of ownership of guns to 21. So that's going to be another plaintiff. We're going to be hearing a lot about this both here and nationally, and I hope David comes back, but last we knew he was weeping in Las Vegas while riding a mechanical bull.
It was pretty impressive.
At the NRA convention.
Yeah,
perfect
absolutely.
timing.
He's a rock star there, so it was good to see him riding the bull. Michael, I know there's a lot of issues that go with it, but I think in this kind of election year and where the electorate is right now on the fringes of both edges of the party, of the fringes of both parties, this seems to me like a political ad waiting to happen for Republicans. It was a Christmas come early, so that you're worried about getting your guns taken away. Here's a city doing it. Although there's other cities that have had laws like this, do you think we're going to see some political ramifications from this move from Boulder?
I actually think both sides will try to use it, to play up to their base because it's very popular on the left to have stuff like this, and the right, obviously, that's already started with protests and different stuff like that. I think this has been tried in other cities. It hasn't really made anywhere safer, and I don't think it'll make Boulder safer. I think that with the lawsuit, one of the big things, and Patty brought this up, was the fact that moving it to 21 years old, you have 18, 19, 20-year-olds who can fight in the military, who can die for your country, who can vote, and now they are not going to have access to purchase firearms. I think that part of it, there could be a big constitutional challenge on. But it also points out how important the courts are right now, right? The Trump administration has taken over. They're starting to fill these federal seats. And does that change, kind of the narrative as time goes on? The last 8 years have been Obama appointees. Do some of these court cases end up turning out differently because the Trump administration is appointing these judges?
Well, speaking of legal cases, Penn, you're our esteemed lawyer at the table. We've heard a lot about the lawsuit and different elements of this particular law. From what we know from other laws in other areas to this one, and I realize it just passed this week, so I'm not expecting a full law brief here, but what can you share about what we should expect legally?
I think Michael raises a good point. Initially, this is going to be handled with local judges, and I suspect the law will be upheld. But the Boulder in this legislation will become sort of the factual backdrop for other cases that will be brought at the federal level to try to challenge the ability of local governments to enact this sort of legislation. And I'm with you. I'm sorry David's not here because I came loaded for bear. I brought a copy of the Constitution with me, and he's not here today. But, when we have these debates, and as David and I normally frame it, I always tell people the first 4 words of the Second Amendment are a well-regulated militia. And so the right to bear arms, at least under the U.S. Constitution, is all within that context. And at the time the Constitution was formed, the issue of regulation was state regulation versus federal regulation and the need for a militia versus the need for an army. But there was never an unqualified right to just have an arsenal of your choosing and carry it around at the time on your horse or in your car and do whatever you wanted to do. And so, Boulder's regulation is just going to be a part of this. It's ironic that we're talking about this on the day of yet another school shooting in Texas that is going to have a tragic outcome with several people having lost their lives. And what it shows you is people have a desire to feel safe. And Michael's right. Both sides are going to play this issue up politically, but I think the overriding sentiment in the country right now is people aren't feeling safe. And ironically, all of these shootings, they're not in inner cities. All of these mass shootings are in suburban schools and locations, which tells you something about people's perceptions about where you are safe and where you're not safe. Some assumptions are going to be turned on their heads. The biggest problem I have with the Boulder decision, ironically, again, is something Michael referenced. I'm from an era when we were protesting the Vietnam War, and part of our argument is if we're old enough to get drafted and get shot at, why can't we, vote or be able to buy a beer or something? And you've got that same dichotomy here with the Boulder legislation.
Krista, do you think, and Boulder's done this many times, but has it inserted a political hot potato for this election year?
It's definitely a hot potato. The sad thing is it's not going to do anything. I mean, you think about the federal assault weapons ban that passed during the Clinton era. It didn't have any effect on crime rates whatsoever. And most of the time, rifles are not used for this purpose. Handguns kill far more people than rifles. And there's an irony here in that, a person who uses a single-shot Dillinger, an itty-bitty gun, to hurt somebody, to kill somebody, or threaten somebody, that person has effectively made that little gun an assault weapon. And yet a so-called assault weapon that's used for target practice or for self-protection is not an assault weapon. So there's a certain kind of arbitrary distinction here. What I would like to see is not these sort of arbitrary laws designated looking at particular kinds of guns. I'd like to see a red flag bill passed, like the one that came up in the legislature this time around, that says let's not take any guns away from normal, good, decent, law-abiding people. But when you've got people making death threats, people who seem like they've got mental issues, when a person is acting aggressive and has red flags, as I have no doubt the shooter in Texas today probably had some red flags, and we'd like that person to get some help, but in the meanwhile, let's take away their guns. We all have a right to self-protection under the Second Amendment, but if you're making crazy threats, that right through due process can be suspended. So let's not target normal, everyday gun owners. Let's target people who are crazy, malicious, and vile.